Welcome to a tutorial video on JavaScript basics. In this video, I'm going to talk about the document object model. When we interact with JavaScript within a browser, when we include it within a script tag in an HTML document, then we're interacting with JavaScript and with another thing called the document object model. When an HTML document is represented within the browser, it's represented as a document object. The object document, which represents the larger HTML document that the current user is looking at within the browser. And we can access different properties of that object to interact with it, to see different parts of it, and to even change it. So we see here document is a global object. Line 70, using console log, I can see what document is. Coming over to the console, we see it is an HTML document. That is its data type. So it's not quite a JavaScript object, but it is similar enough that we can interact with it using JavaScript. And that's what we've done here. So we've said, tell us what this is. It is an HTML document. That is its data type. Within the document global object are all of the children, all of the elements within the HTML document. And we can access them by starting with the body, which all of the HTML elements are in that we see, and moving through them from parent to child, from parent to child, etc. We can start then by using a property of the global object document called body, which represents the elements that are within the body. So we see here on line 74, document.body. And over here in the console, we see it is an HTML body element. As I discussed earlier, when we're looking at these HTML elements, their data type will match what they are. We saw for document, it was an HTML document. And we see for body is an HTML body element. Now, as I mentioned, we can progress through these from parent to child, etc., and move through the tree-like structure that represents the document that has all of the elements within the larger HTML document. One way we can traverse these is through the children of different elements, and we can start using body. So I have here on line 81, document.body.children. Children is a property of all elements that contain any children that that element has. In this case, we're saying go from the global document to the body and then any children of the body. And then we're using the index 0, so the first child of the body of the larger document, which is, this tells us over here, an HTML element. And in fact, let's verify this and scroll up to the very top. We see body and we see header is the very first child, which is an HTML element, and it's what we expected to see. So that checks out. Scrolling down here, while we could move from parent to child, check the children, and check the children, and move through this entire document, that would get very monotonous. There are two general functions that document provides that exist as properties that we can call because they're functions. And we supply them with different parameters to get different return values back. One of the most commonly used is getElementById. We know, for example, that elements, if they have an ID, it will be unique within the document. So we can call getElement, a single element, by its ID, knowing that that will be unique within our document. So then we can give it a string and say, hey, go find the element that matches this ID by looking all of them and finding the one we need. We see here on line 85, getElementById, a property of the global object document is a function, which we already knew. GetElementById is a function and it has native code. It is implemented by the browser. It is not a function we can change or mess with. So as I mentioned, we can give it a string to then go look for that ID. We see that here on line 93. We're sending the parameter a string links. Let's scroll up in this document and find links so we know what we're talking about. So right here, lines 46 to 59, is links. See, the ID equals links, and it has children, paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. The paragraphs have their own children, the at tag with a hyperreference to different links. So we know when we're talking about links, we're talking about this, lines 46 through 59 within this document. And that's all the stuff here. So we see down here, when we ask it for get element by ID links and return that, we see it is an HTML div element, which is true, and we just verified that. So the response we got back from using get element by ID, supplying with the parameter of the string links, was an HTML div element, which is what we expected to see. Well, all of our elements also have other properties. They have children, but they also have something called inner HTML. Inner HTML has a somewhat long history within the HTML specification, but generally what it means is the HTML content that is within that element. Now, when I mentioned that earlier when we were looking at links, it had the children paragraphs, the paragraphs had children with the A tag, and onwards through this entire section here, lines 46 to 59. I mentioned that because all of that was the inner HTML. So it wasn't technically lines 46 to 59, it was actually 47 to 58, the content of that element, the inner HTML. So we can access that as a property, and we see that here on line 98. Document.getElement by ID, the parameter links as a string, and then on that returned object, its property inner HTML, which we see actually printed right here, which is the inner HTML of that element, which I just reviewed when we looked at it within the same document. So one way we can access different things using JavaScript with the document object model is to look at the inner HTML of different elements. Now I mentioned we can use getElement by ID and supply an ID. We could also use getElements by class and search for a class as well. Those are two different ways to search the tree-like document object that is represented of the HTML document. So we can look for an ID, or we can look for elements by class. Getting getElements by class returns an array. GetElement by ID returns a single thing. So getElement or getElements returns an array. GetElement returns a single thing, which makes sense based on their name. So we can access different elements within this document using JavaScript. We can see what the inner HTML is, and we can navigate parent to child if we really want to, or use getElement by ID, or use getElements by class to search for different things. So this is all well and good, but another very important thing about JavaScript and working with the document object model is that we can change things. We can change the document for the user using JavaScript. So we saw with inner HTML, it returned the content of the inner HTML. Well, we can change that content. In fact, right here on line 104, if I take out these comments and now we run this, I'm saying in the document, get an element by ID links, which we already know is up here, line 47, 46 to 59, with its inner HTML of 47 to 58. So we say, hey, go find this element. Now on this object you've returned, for its property inner HTML, set it to an empty string. So over here in the result, we see links. It's right here at the bottom here, which we've been looking at. A resource, Google, a resource in the same directory, a resource in one directory above, a resource in two directories. 4 links right here. So if we run this with the new code, that disappears. We've now changed the document using JavaScript. So as a review of all of this, we can use JavaScript to interact with a document object model within a browser. When it runs code it finds within a script tag, right here lines 60 to 106, it treats that code, runs it as JavaScript, and allows us to interact with different things. We mentioned the document object model. It is representative of the HTML document we're seeing within the web browser. And we can do that through the global object document. Document has different properties we can interact with. It has the two functions getElementById and getElementsByClass. It also has a property that is an object body that allows us to interact with elements. All elements within this have a property children, which is an array of all children it has, and so we can interact with document.body.children to look at the children, immediate children, of the parent element body. Finally, and as I mentioned, we can use getElementById to find individual elements based on their ID within a document. We can use getElementsByClass to find multiple elements based on if they have a class or not. Finally, we can use one of many different properties of elements to change them. Looking at inner HTML allows us to change the HTML content of an element. We can access it by using inner HTML, and we can change its value by setting it to different things. In our example, we set it to an empty string and it erased that from the document, so we no longer see it over here. But we know it exists because we originally saw it when it outputted it. But right now, as of the execution of this document, it's gone. Thanks for watching.